This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today, our subject is gain the upper hand over procrastination. Now, I'm sure you don't procrastinate at all, do you?
Never,
Didn't
never,
think so.
ever, ever. That's why I'm not interested in this topic.
So, what drew you to this topic today then?
Well, I had been putting not, I don't, it wasn't a conscious putting things off, but I was never finding the time I was telling myself to do something. And then a series of events occurred where I took care of it. And then that led to a sequence of taking care of other things because I couldn't take care of the big thing because I had all of these little things that needed to be done first, if that makes any sense.
Yep. Yep.
And and I just feel like, it wasn't like anything dire or whatever. But the point of the story is it just took a weight off of my mind. And now I'm energized to do more things. So I'm synthesizing, as we often do in these conversations, several different approaches about procrastination. So what do you think is the main source of procrastination for humans? Because everybody procrastinates, quite frankly. Even the
Well,
high achievers
yeah.
procrastinate.
I often think it's if it's something that we're really not interested in doing, it doesn't feel important enough to us,
Hmm.
it's very easy to just, push it to a side and try to forget it. I'll get to it when I get to it. Um, I would say typically if it's something important that is going to make us feel good, um, we tend to do those things first. At least that that's always been what how I have determined what needs to get done. Although I've always been a do it now person, so usually I don't have a list of things that have to get done.
Hmm. Hmm. And so the article that kind of triggered my, rekindled my interest in getting to the bottom of it. For whatever reason, a lot of people have been talking about procrastination, how they're stuck, all the phrases we give on these things. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Darius, what is his last name? Fox. I always pronounce it in my head, but I don't know if that's actually the name of it, his name. But Timothy Pitchell, Pychyl. I would never have known that would be the spelling. Is a professor, a PhD professor at Carleton University in Canada, and he's like one of the international researchers study writers on procrastination. And he basically tells us there's many reasons for doing it. And we often refer to it as a time management issue. Like, I don't have the time, but it's not that. It's our feelings, all right? It's our emotion regulation problem, he calls it. So how does that color what you just said to me?
Um, well, that's really, the way I was thinking. Um, in my home, my husband is one of these individuals who's always saying he doesn't have enough time. Um, and typically he'll come home from work on Friday and tell me all these things he needs to get done over the weekend. And he doesn't do it Friday night. He doesn't do it Saturday. Sunday, he still hasn't done it. And then right around 8 o'clock on Sunday night, he'll go into the office and knock everything out because he knows he can't go to work the next morning unless those things are done. So he doesn't even have an interest in doing them, but he's doing them only because he has to.
And what propels him to do it when he does it?
I think for him, it's all of a sudden the clock, it's like the clock is striking midnight. Oh, if I don't get this done, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin, or lose my job. Um,
That'll
but
do
he's,
it.
but he's always been like this, no matter what the job is or whatever the situation is. He knows what he's got to do. He'll tell you what he's got to do. He doesn't make it sound, like it's, really difficult to do. but he just waits and waits. And then it, I feel like it puts the pressure on me, us living together, because now all of a sudden he's so busy.
And the pressure on you in what way?
Um, I'm almost feeling sorry for him, like, you know, look at you, you're staying up late, you're doing all this work. Um, and I've had to sort of train myself that it's not my issue, but sometimes it's difficult, not to feel that way when you're sharing space with somebody and they're sort of running ragged, doing all these check off things that they had to finish.
Yeah, my husband would always put off packing to like not only the night before, but sometimes the morning of, an early morning flight or something. And I had the same thing, observing this going on. It's not that I had it all together myself, but at least I was maybe packing at midnight, not at 6 a.m.
Right.
When we had like a 7 a.m. flight or something. Um, and the good news is, at least here, the airport isn't all that far away, whereas where I lived in New York, to get to LaGuardia was, with traffic, was probably about an hour, getting through the city and everything else.
Sure.
So packing at the last minute. So the issue is I had the capacity to do it earlier because I did do it earlier with that particular time limit. So that's why it always tends to show up as a time management issue. Well, if we just put it on the list and then we know when we're going to do it, as if
Yeah.
that was going to do it. All right. So the author's name that I could not remember because I kind of mentally slide over his last name. His first name is Darius. His last name is Farrow. R-O, sorry, why did I say R? F-O-R-O-U-X. All right.
Okay.
So anyway, he had an article that basically said there's a few signs that you're procrastinating too much. Apparently, there's just a right amount, like the three bears, with Goldilocks. You haven't accomplish your goals in a long time. You keep making excuses for why you're not getting things done. You find yourself distracted by activities that don't help you reach your goals or are unhelpful to your progress, and you worry a lot. And then that sets up this cycle of guilt, as he talks about it. And it has a lot of regret when we don't do things. So in the context that you mentioned with that person you live with and the one that I lived with, there's a couple of contributing things according to Thoreau. One is committing to too many things. Nothing I do ever. And basically his solution for that is you work on your goal every day for 15 minutes minimum, kind of like dollar cost averaging. If I just spend 15 minutes on this, I'm not making a commitment that'll move us forward. But the problem is it's like eating the elephant, according to Thoreau. We don't eat the elephant all at one time, but that's how we're thinking. I
Right.
mean, does that sound valid to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And so maybe chopping things up into just 15 minutes, I'm going to set the timer and I'm just going to do that. The other part is he calls it too much tediousness. So basically, they procrastinate on tasks that are dull or tedious, like cleaning out the silverware drawer because it collects all the little, whatever grimy things and needs to be cleaned out from time to time. And I remember reading an article about how, like, I think it was when Airbnb might have come onto the scene and then basically living in other people's houses, on a whatever basis, when you're on a trip, was great, unless, their daily stuff looked like grime to us,
Right.
looked like ooky things. But the point is, we live with that all the time. I mean, I can just think of several places that I haven't gotten to for a while. Um, I don't know what you might be thinking on your end, but I have little creatures in my house that as they walk by, I can just see little plumes of, molting hair coming off of them in the sunshine. It's like,
Yeah.
I understand why they're not naked now. It just seems like it's not a seasonal, it's all the time. So in terms of some of the things, anything else pop up for you? Just me talking about those kinds of things?
Well, again, I grew up in a home where everything you just, when you had to do something, you just did it. you didn't wait. When you took off your clothes, you didn't throw them on the floor. And if you did, you picked them right up and you put them in the laundry hamper or you hung them up. And so, you know, things may have been tedious, but I didn't feel it that way because I was constantly doing. But most recently, I find myself, especially on the weekend, preparing meals is tedious to me. And I think it's because other things are going on around me. I don't have as good a routine because my husband is home on the weekend, and either we have plans to go out or, I want to spend time with him. And so things do pile up for me. So usually on Monday mornings, I get up way early because I don't want that stuff sitting around while I start my work week.
Yeah, and the visual clutter, the, whatever, actual whatever, I guess I would call it clutter.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things that just the emotional pile up um take a toll on us, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah. Well, Professor Titchell tells us that, anchoring back to the misregulation of emotion, we think that by putting things off, we're going to feel better. And in fact, the pressure just builds as a rule. And we know that we can reward ourselves for getting something done. But sometimes, I don't know if you're like me, I don't have time to do the reward
right.
because, I'm still like 3 tasks behind. And it's like spending money or counting calories and so on. He tells us that we keep thinking that these things are just this little bit, but then we don't realize how it piles up. So one of the techniques somebody taught me years ago, and I just love it, and I shared it recently with some of these people that were raising the topic for themselves in some coaching calls. The phrase to say to myself that always seems to work, but I don't always remember to do it, is I'm not going to start this now, but if I were to start it, what would that be? And it's just something about that allowing my attention to, you know, get to that trigger point of, okay, yeah, all right, I would do this. It's that not knowing where to start, but not in a deep way. It's just asking that simple little question. So what shows up in your head when I say that?
Well, as soon as you said it, it's like, um, I can't, if I don't make my bed almost as soon as the two of us wake up in the morning, the rest of my day feels sloppy, even if I make it 10 minutes later than normal. There's
Yeah.
something about the routine of getting that bed straightened up, making it look fresh, that, okay, now my day has started. I can go take my shower, I can get dressed, and I'm on a routine that feels good. But when I don't have that bed made, and then I have to start my workday before I can even get back in there to make it, it gnaws at me. It's almost like I think people are in there looking at my messy bed. I mean, it makes no sense. In fact, my husband, a couple years ago said, "Oh, you have to hurry up and make the bed because the bed fairy comes and checks every morning." And it's almost like I sort of believe that in my mind. If it's not made, it's going to be noticed. And, not that I'm going to get my hand slapped, but I'm going to slap my own hand because I didn't do what I needed to do.
Yeah, and that's an example of an open loop, something that we routinely do or want to do that we don't do. And it takes a cognitive toll on us. Maybe cognitive isn't the, but an energy toll on us because it's something that, it's like the blinking cursor in our brain is how I call it, that it hasn't finished the loop, that little spool thing that we see, or the little hourglass, in cartoon form on software. Well, it's the software in our brain. Oh, this wasn't addressed, something that I would normally do.
Right.
et cetera, plus all the emotional baggage with it, because, we had the same thing in our household. And, put your dishes in the dishwasher when you're done, and, don't leave things out, and, take things back to your room if you took them out into the living room, all of that stuff. And it all contributed to a house that could be ready to have people visit at any time. But where we lived in New York was way out in the boonies, north of New York City, no doubt, but way out in the boonies, and you weren't inclined, people were not inclined to come out and visit us on the, fly
Right.
without calling first, because we might not be there, and it was quite a trek into Exurbia. So that was great. But, we were reasonably orderly, some of us a little more orderly than others, some almost bordering on OCD in the family. That was not me. I did not get that gene. But the point is, there's that sense of having things in order, which then, isn't creating that emotional drag as we're going through the day. Because, you're describing it in so many words that it's occupying your brain on some level.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, my husband has this habit of if he thinks there's something sticky on his dish, he'll put it in the sink and run water on it. And I'll come up behind him and say, why is it still in the sink? Well, I'm letting it soak. And the question I always ask him is, are you going to remember to come back in here and put it in the dishwasher? And number two, it really doesn't have to soak, but whatever. And he'll say, just leave it, I'll get to it. And it can be hours later, and that one dish sitting in the sink just grates at me. And so I end up putting it in the dishwasher. And his comment then is, if you do it for me, when am I ever going to learn?
Okay, so this falls under the totally, politically incorrect phrasing that we used to have in various office settings that I was in, and it's called male acquired ignorance syndrome. So if you don't do it well, then the female person, and I know this is totally sexist, person tends to step in and take care of it. And
Yep.
so I tend to agree that he won't learn. But the issue is it also takes a toll on you.
Right.
And so, maybe a conversation about it and so on. And it's my understanding that dishwashers, we don't need to soak or even rinse or all of those things, at least the newer versions. So Pitchell tells us that all of this stuff that we're like putting off, maybe this falls into the Thoreau's article item, that this is a tedious task, that the actual extra arm extension to place something into the dishwasher is just a little too tedious. And I'm trying not to be judgmental. I'm just trying to be playful.
No, I get
Maybe,
it. No problem.
maybe with a little hook there, because even, teasing can be aggressive, not necessarily intentionally, but on some level, unconsciously. The idea is to identify what emotions we're feeling. So in the moment, he didn't feel like it. All right. I mean,
Right.
if he were to probably explore that. And Pitchell says that feeling like that, doing it at the moment is not a helpful thought loop. That because we're not, there are going to be many things that we do that we're not going to want to do. We don't feel like doing it in the moment. And just being able to catch ourselves in that fork in the road, like, oh, I don't feel like doing it now, versus do it and be done with it. And basically he asked that question, what's the next action I need to do if I were to get started? So it's like a little twist on what I had said earlier that somebody had shared with me. Maybe they knew about Pitchell back then, but they didn't mention that to me. So all you do then is take your focus, your spotlight off of the feeling, I don't feel like doing it, and you're putting it on the next action. And it's just enough of a little tripping the wire to take the action.
Right.
Right. So how might that work for you? Maybe not for that person you live with, but maybe for you.
Um, so there's two things that um, I definitely do procrastinate about. The first one is that on the second weekend of every month, my husband and I are supposed to sit down and put all of our bills in that aren't on auto pay. And it takes all of maybe 30 minutes. Um, and I'm the one who keeps putting it off. Oh no, we'll do it later today. We'll do it tomorrow. Okay, we'll do it next weekend. And I know there's a deadline that I have to do it by because otherwise bills are going to be late. And then when I finally, realize that, I panic. And this means that not only do I have to be ready, but I have to make sure that he's ready as well. And the reason we do it together is more for a check and balance on, what's coming in and what's going out. And I don't know why I procrastinate about it, but I do every single month. And yet it gnaws at me because if I would just do it when we're supposed to, I wouldn't have to think about it, all that extra time.
Yeah, the kind of emitting stress um energy the whole time.
Yep.
So in the moment, if you could catch yourself and the things you're saying to yourself, for me, the thing that will stop me is I may be confronted with some like ugly fact or something is wrong or that I did something wrong. The idea of doing something wrong is
Sure.
part occupational hazard, but part of it is, how we grew up because, it was just we wanted to do things correctly and be proper reflections on our parents and so on. So, and I now that I've been able to pay attention to that, then I can just kind of pat my little kid inside me saying, it's okay, it's okay. We're just going to take a peek. We're just going to do this little thing. And that gets me over some things. And so where might your little child inside be saying, I don't want to do it?
Um, it's like trying to get my homework done when I was a little kid. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until and, and I'm talking really little, like elementary school type stuff. I didn't start becoming an overachiever to get my homework done until it looked like I had so much to do that I didn't want to think about it. I just had to do it. Um, and so that's what this reminds me of every month is, oh, I don't want to have to color that picture right now. Oh, I can do it later. Um, but yet it gnaws at me because I know it's got to get done.
And then when you do it later, you may or may not have the time allocated properly to do it.
You're right. I mean, when we finally sit down to do it, I could probably tell you that 9 times out of 10, um, I'm rushing to get through it because of something else, either someplace that we're going or something else that I have to do, or I'm really too exhausted to do it. And I just know that if we don't get it done now, you know, things are going to be late. So I put more pressure on myself. And I argue with my husband over during that 30-minute period to the point of like, why?
Well, and I have to imagine that arguing and that emotional tension and so on, um, probably has this is my, layperson's psychological analysis here. I'm not qualified to do, but I'll go ahead there anyway. But I imagine that that's kind of sets up the feeling of, oh, this is an unpleasant time.
Oh,
And I
absolutely.
don't want to do it. So it maybe just exacerbates the whole idea of, setting aside that time and actually doing it. I mean, the setting aside the time, I think we're all good at, but the doing it in the allotted time is the thing we're not good at.
Exactly.
But you and I have talked about other ways to engage in habits, to cultivate habits. And so what occurs to you in that regard?
Well, talking about this out loud, which is something I typically don't do, is as far as, getting these bills paid every month, uh, because I have a habit of putting it on the calendar, I have to figure out, a way to not procrastinate about it. Because if I know it's scheduled for, the second Saturday of every month in the morning, just do it and probably not have the arguments going on between the two of us because it's planned, it's what we're going to do, we're going to get it done, and I don't have to think about it for another 30 days.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is that you in all of the time slots we have, which are not many, we each have 168 hours a week, and some of it's spent sleeping and eating and preparing to sleep and preparing to eat and other activities. And then if we back it out to what we do in our day activities, be it a job or other commitments, or in the evening, depending on your shift and so on. We don't have a lot of extra flexible time, but to the extent that we can have things booked on the calendar, so we know that's the landing place. So if we invoke BJ Fogg's tiny habits thing, if we can anchor, well, there's another group that advocates for reducing the resistance. So setting in your mind or even on the calendar something that you will reward yourself with. So I'm mixing two concepts. So BJ Fogg
Sure.
says, pick an anchor, ABC. It's a recipe. A is the anchor thing that you would tie that recurring monthly appointment to, that you're going to reliably do at that time. Right. So I can't think of anything. Something that you'll do.
Okay.
And then you do the build part right at the end of that first thing, that the anchor that you've identified, that behavior you'll reliably do at the time frame on your calendar. And then at the end of it, so you do the behavior and you articulate exactly what those steps would be. So there's no spooling about, well, okay, where do I start, et cetera, et cetera. And you psychologically prepare, okay, I know I'm going to have these negative thoughts, come up, that I didn't do this in time, I didn't do that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to like notice it and say, well, thank you for showing up, but go away. And then at the end, celebrate that you completed the cycle on that thing you said you're going to do when you did it. So that's the tiny habits approach. The other approach is to not in addition to the celebration, so not to alter BJ Fogg's approach, but to also say just the fact of sitting down, how am I going to reward myself? So it might be for me having I'd like to do those things first thing in the morning, and I'm an early riser, so if I can get those blocks of things done in the morning, like making your bed, I feel okay, I'm set. I have more flexibility, I have more choice in my day and so on. But these things I have to get out of the way in order
Right.
to feel good about it. So then I can anchor that with my first piping hot cup of tea in the morning. There's just something about it that it's not the same for the rest of the day. I could have hot tea, the rest of the day, but it's that first one that is just extra pleasure from. So what are the kinds of things that you might incorporate there to reduce the resistance to sitting down and just doing the thing that you allocated in that time frame?
So for me, getting it done in that time frame, it probably would be, you know, early in the morning, soon after, we both have greeted the day, so to speak. Um, but once it was over, especially as the weather's getting nicer, um, going out for a walk, whether we go together or alone, because that would be my reward. It'd be like, you know what? I did the hard stuff. Now I'm going to just do something that feels good.
Mhm.
Um, and when the weather's not nice, maybe taking the time to, go binge something on Netflix. Um, hey, my work is done, and now I get to do something that's going to be pleasurable. Um, and for him, I think he would find the same thing. Okay. Um, because typically when we do this 30-minute or so exercise every month, um, the two of us afterwards, we sort of like retreat to different spots of the house for a little bit. It's almost like we have to breathe independently.
And I remember when we were moving our offices, around COVID time, it was very stressful. I had to move, I think I had been in that space for 15 years, and some other people were not going forward with the lease, which meant that there were too few of us to continue on in that large space without them. So I basically had 3 weeks to make the formal decision about whether I was going to stay there or not, and I decided to leave. And it was very stressful, and I kept finding myself at the scanner because we had this like shared industrial strength scanner, which was just gorgeous. Not the smaller type, which are fine, but it was just handy. And although we had been reasonably, paperless, we were not without paper. I don't know
Sure.
if there is such a thing. So I would find myself at the scanner listening to like a podcast or something like that while I was mindlessly doing these things. And I kept catching myself saying, "What are you doing here? This is like the last thing you should be doing." And then I realized I'm self-soothing. And I wasn't conscious of the stress that had been building up, like, oh, I still have to get this done. And I hadn't heard back from, this entity that was going to take some of the furniture and blah, blah, blah. And, I'm running out of time. I'm running out of time. So, and then once I was able to identify that, I recognized, okay, go with it. You need to, kind of like, patting down my arms, like they're there,
Yep.
calm down, calm down. And it was okay. And then I didn't have that sensation again. So where does the self-soothing come in this instance?
Well, for me, the self-soothing comes in when it's over with. I feel like now I can take that deep breath.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, for the 2 weeks that I may have been putting it off, you know, I find myself hyperventilating every time I think about it.
Yep.
Um, and when we do it on time, um, I I know I always say the same thing to my husband, you know, I just have to remind you that we're going to do it on the second Saturday of the month. And he just looks at me like, yeah, that's all you have to do. But, when you're working with somebody, sometimes you don't always want to be the one to say something like, hey, we got to get this done. You're
Mhm.
hoping that maybe they will take the initiative. And I think that's part of my procrastination. Oh, he didn't say anything. So, we're just going to put it off.
Yeah, neither one of us will notice that we're not doing it.
Right.
Like as if
Exactly.
that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I don't look, maybe it'll go away. Like,
Yeah.
I'll try
Exactly.
away. Well, and these are such human things we do. It's just, I find it all fascinating. All right. So one of the things that Darius Thoreau um, mentions is doing a sprint routine. So he says that basically, find your time slot, in terms of the week or the month or whatever, and then have a good resting period before and after. So like then, set your clock for like 10, 15 minutes, whatever time frame is necessary, do it. And then have that landing place on either side. So for me, that would look like having that hot tea in the beginning because you have a little, like, okay, I'm gearing up thing. I'm enjoying this. And then at the end as well. And then just say I'm allotting 15 minutes, a half an hour. And that kind of goes with, have you ever heard of the Pomodoro effect?
No.
So Pomodoro was a concept that came up, and there's little timers online. Pomodoro. I think that maybe that was the man's name. I can't remember. It's been so long. But basically, to work in sprints of 25 minutes, 15 or what, 10 minutes off, whatever that works out to, and just alternate that way. And there's something about knowing that you have the break soon, and hopefully you're not making a prison break and you're leaving the
Right.
premises, but the idea is to as Thoreau is saying, have that built in so that because I think part of it for me is if I get into it may be overwhelming, and it's the future, the potential for overwhelm that sometimes daunts me. And maybe I'm alone in that,
No,
but
I
I
don't,
don't think so.
no, I think, when we're putting anything off, um, anyone who doesn't believe that it's still bothering them,
Mhm.
um, I think they're kidding themselves. I mean, my husband will say, "Oh, didn't bother me. I know we're going to get around to doing it." It's like, yeah, but are we going to get around to doing it and then realize that we're late and now we have to, backpedal? I
Yeah,
don't like doing those things. So
exactly.
I think what I'm going to do on my calendar today is make a bigger note about, doing this one big procrastinator uh, on time. And I will let you know at the next show how we did, because that 2 week period will be right before our next show.
How convenient.
Yes. Well,
All
I
right.
hope have a great day today. And for those of you listening, it is April 1st, April Fool's
Oh,
Day.
that's right. Oh
Yeah.
my word.
And none of this was a joke. How do you
No,
like that?
I totally
Very
forgot it's
real.
the first.
I will talk to you soon. Have a
All right.
great day,
Here.
Candace. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.